We always ask this question, do we care about carbon? Can we build a climate fit for life? And if your climate isn't right, you will not have a habitat. So really what I'm focusing on here in this presentation is carbon. Limited resources, a blue marble floating in a black void, that's Earth. I would argue our biggest issue is overpopulation, too many people on the planet, and it's a big deal, using finite resources. So spaceship Earth, it's a phrase coined back in the 17th century, and Buckminster Fuller used it as well, and we're floating through space just using up our resources. And we have a purpose. I work with interface. Carpet doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. It's very much about the purpose. I'll talk a wee little bit about leadership as well, because we developed our purpose, we designed for purpose, and this guy, Ray Anderson, kicked us off on that journey. And I'm just going to show a little 2-minute video of Ray, and basically what he talks about in that video sort of sets the theme for everything I'm going to talk about afterwards, and show you how we're, as a company manufacturing a carpet product, has tried to achieve zero impact, do no harm, and then to go that step further to become restorative.
For 21 years, I never gave a thought to what we were taking from the earth or doing to the earth in the making of our products. And then in the summer of 1994, we began to hear questions from our customers we'd never heard before. What's your company doing for the environment? And we didn't have answers. The real answer was not very much. And it really disturbed many of our people, not me so much as them. And a group in our research department decided to convene a task force and bring people from our businesses around the world to come together to assess our company's worldwide environmental position, to begin to frame answers for those customers. They asked me if I would come and speak to that group and give them a kickoff speech to launch this new task force with an environmental vision. And I didn't have an environmental vision. I did not want to make that speech. And at sort of the propitious moment, this book landed on my desk. It was Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce. And I began to read The Ecology of Commerce, really desperate for inspiration. And very quickly into that book, I found the phrase, the death of birth. It was E.O. Wilson's expression for species extinction, the death of birth, and it was a point of a spear into my chest. And I read on, and the spear went deeper, and it became an epiphanal experience, a total change of mindset for myself, and a change of paradigm. Can any product be made sustainably? Well, not any and every product. Can you make landmines sustainably? Well, I don't think so. There's a more fundamental question than that about landmines. Some products ought not be made at all. Unless we can make carpets sustainably, perhaps we don't have a place in a sustainable world, but neither does anybody else making products unsustainably. One day, early in this journey, it dawned on me that the way I've been running Interface is the way of the plunderer. Plundering something that's not mine, something that belongs to every creature on earth. And I said to myself, my goodness, the day must come when this is illegal, that when plundering is not allowed. It must come. So I said to myself, my goodness, someday people like me will end up in jail. When I think of what could be, I visualize an organization of people committed to a purpose. And the purpose is doing no harm. I see a company that has severed the umbilical cord to earth for its raw materials, taking raw materials that have already been extracted and using them over and over again, driving that process with renewable energy. It is our plan, it remains our plan to climb Mount Sustainability, that mountain that's higher than Everest, infinitely higher than Everest, far more difficult to scale. That point at the top symbolizing zero footprint.
talking about zero footprint and zero use and all the rest of it. Really, it's about balance. And we're seeing that, maybe it's not enough just to do no harm. We have to start being restorative. And Interface came to that realization a couple of years ago when our new CEO came on board and basically was asked the question, okay, you're getting close to your Mission Zero target, what are you going to do next? And really, from within the organization, it's all about another audacious challenge. And climate change is the biggest moral imperative of our time. It's about carbon, and we have to do something about that. So we look beyond 2020, and we say to ourselves, okay, where do we go from here? So we've put together a plan as a company, as a carpet company. It's not a big corporation, so how are we going to impact climate? How are we going to take that back? And we've come up with basically a program, what we call Let's Take Climate Back. And we believe that if we can actually negatively impact our environment by mistake, which we've done, we've increased the carbon content in our atmosphere exponentially. And we've done it by mistake. We've polluted our environment so much, we're starting to change the climate. So if we've done that by mistake, surely we can right it consciously. And a good example would be the way we approached treating the ozone layer back in the 70s. We need leadership to take climate back. And the way we looked at our climate take back plan, we got 4 pillars, we got 7 steps. I'll just look at it, and it is really bunched into 4 pillars. So we got the Live Zero, that was our whole Mission Zero initiative. That's where we took out all the toxics out of our products. We took out the phthalates, the heavy metals, the formaldehydes, the fluorocarbons. We looked at recycled content, starting to use materials that already existed, fishing nets, plastics that are there already. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I'll talk about Love Carbon, see it as an opportunity, not a challenge. Of course, nature is struggling to deal with the carbon we are putting out there. How can we help nature cool? How can we help it cope? And leading the industrial re-revolution. It's not just about one company, and I'll talk about that. So, Live Zero, I've just talked about how we actually close the loop, recycle our carpet. We've got an end-of-life solution. I designed a small-scale system in Australia for taking our carpet back, separating the yarn from the backing, getting the backing back into new carpet and sending the yarn to our suppliers for recycling. That's all very good. We've cut our water use. We're putting in rainwater capture to use at our factory, so we're not taking off the mains. We went for 100% renewable energy. So we're 40% of the way there in Australia. The other 60%, the natural gas. I'm currently working on a project to replace that with a renewable gas source. We don't have green gas in Australia. We have it in Europe. We have it in the US. We have it in the UK. And we could actually claim 100% renewable energy in those countries, but we can't in Australia. And I'm working with stakeholders in government, gas networks, technology developers to actually get Australia's first green gas. And this is about leadership and it's about influence. And we're getting those people around the table as a carpet company because we want renewable energy. And of course, redesign and commerce, we're looking at the evergreen leasing again, where we'll actually lease our carpet. We'll own it throughout its life and take it back at the end. So we have ownership in that product. We know what we've put into it, and therefore we'll be very confident that when we get it back, we can recycle that and it won't be contaminated with another stream. 93% of our impact is global warming potential, and that's the one that we are focusing on now. So it is about carbon for us. How do you know which one has the least impact on the environment? Maybe if you get a t-shirt that doesn't fade, that you don't need a wash, that's made from recycled materials using renewable energy, that's the one you'll go for. But how do you know that's it? End product declarations are key to understanding the life cycle impacts of a product on the environment, from raw materials to manufacture to use to end of life. 4 stages. And each stage has an impact, and unless you actually model that and calculate what the impact is and have a third party verified, it's very difficult to make a decision. So I'm not sure. You could be right in taking any one of those t-shirts. Yellow's my colour, I'll go natural, but wool, 3 times the impact of this synthetic carpet. So where do you go? It starts to get very complex, and I'll just show you how we actually measure to manage. This is our footprint, average footprint for a carpet tile, and you can see where most of the impact is. It's here, in the raw materials. Our manufacturing, all the good work I do down there in Minto or Sydney, trying to reduce our environmental impact by reducing our electricity, our water usage, etc., 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 we're not even 10% of the product's footprint. Use, even transport, not a big part of it. And we ship all our raw materials in and manufacture in Sydney. Use, vacuuming, steam cleaning over its life, it's a big impact. And then end of life recycling. So once you know all this, you can do something about it. Once you know where the impacts are. So we work very, very closely with our suppliers to get this done. Hence the 100% recycled content in the nylon 6. So that's a life cycle profile for our product. If I was, for instance, in Unilever and it was a soap powder, the raw material side would be very low, manufacturing side would be a bit higher, and the use side would be through the roof, because that's where all the pollution is, that's where all the impact is. So it's just different for different products. Just a quickie then on our product footprint, manufactured in Sydney. A little bit of a gap here in 2013. We lost our factory to a catastrophic fire, so we weren't producing that year. Probably the biggest impact we had on the environment in all the time we were in operation. But we've since got right down here. And it's very interesting about the living building centre versus a commercial building. And it's about a third of the impact. And you'll find that when we actually look at our competitors and our carpets, and this is where we can also use our impacts and our environmental credentials as a marketing tool. And I won't be shy about this, because when you look here, you'll see the interface carpet impacts are all up at the light side, and it gets heavier as we go down. So that's where we are, around about the 7, and that was the Australian footprint. And then you start looking at the heavier products. Now, it's okay for our competitors to say, yeah, we're recyclable, we've got this in our product, you haven't got that in our product, whatever. For me, it's about carbon, and it's about footprint. And when you start looking at those footprints, you start to realize that those products have a bigger impact on the environment. So as an architect, if you're looking at interiors, you'd want to see end product declarations, and they are available, because this information is all from end product declarations. This is not just something I've dreamed up to piddle on the competition. I'm into sustainability. I'm not a salesman. As I said earlier, I prefer the science. So this summarizes what we've done. We've done our life cycle assessments in this part. We've worked out where all our big imprints are, our impacts. Then we've worked on our factory and reducing that impact right across the supply chain. We've got over a 60% reduction so far. We look at what the rest remains and we offset that. And when I say we offset that, then we become carbon neutral. And since 1st of January 2018, we've been carbon neutral across our full product range, across the full life cycle, not just across the manufacturing step. And I think that's very, very important again, when you're talking about carbon and impact. So as an architect, if you're looking at your buildings and the materials that are going into it, you really want to know what those impacts are. You can add them up and you can compare and you can make a better decision on that. It's about balance, as I said again. It's about not putting as much carbon into that atmosphere that nature can handle. So there's more than one pillar to any plan. So nothing actually operates in a void, and this is really what I'm talking about. These are some of the offset projects. We could do offset projects in New Zealand and Australia, and we will be adding those to our portfolio. But really, some of these third world countries is where the impact is bigger. And it's better to do the projects in those countries. Carbon knows no international boundaries, so as far as I'm concerned, globally, it doesn't matter where it is. It might sell the product better if you can say, hey, we do all our offsets in New Zealand. Our carbon neutral carpet is offsets here or in Australia, but we don't say that. It's a global thing. Love carbon. So how can you love carbon? And it's about, as I say, seeing it as an opportunity, not a challenge. If you can actually sequester carbon, if you can convert it into something like a plastic or a durable material that you can reuse, then you've got yourself a product that has sequestered carbon. And this is the key to us becoming carbon negative by 2040. That's our goal. We are carbon neutral now. What we want to be is carbon negative by 2040. So how do you do that? Basically, it's like everything else. If I could explain it this way, a carbon negative carpet tile will sequester more carbon that will be produced when it's being manufactured. And we do that by using a biomass or a bio-based content. It's not just about the recycled content. the renewable energy, recycled content, and bio-based. So there's a whole combination of things you've got to do to get there. And in fact, about 2 years ago, we produced the world's first proof positive tile. Now, if you're not into carpet, so what? But we did. We made a product that is carbon negative. I was saying earlier, our average carbon impact was 7 kilos per metre squared. This is -2. So this one's produced from bio-based, recycled content, 100% recycled yarn, cellulosic fibres, etc., etc. Can't tell you what's in it. That's our secret for the time being. All I can say is that it came out at -2, but the supply chain hasn't caught up with us. So we don't have sufficient material to continue to make carbon negative tiles. So therefore, in the meantime, we've taken some of the technology. It's a bit like sort of the offshots from the moon challenge, where NASA developed all sorts of other products when they're actually focused on going to the moon. So this product here uses some of the technology and the materials from the carbon negative tile, and it's about 2-3 kilos impact. So much less again. So this is all about a journey. It's not about zero immediately. It's about getting to the end point. And there's a lot of stages and compromises you make on the way. So that's what we're talking about. And when I talk about leading the Industrial Revolution, I'll come back again to some of the things we're doing here also. So how you do this? This is very hard to say. Purposeful advocacy, okay? We really do need to lobby government. We do need regulation. People say our governments don't like to regulate. I think Ronald Reagan was famous for saying, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. The result is Grenfell Towers, places like that, where regulation goes out the window, where developers are self-regulating, where the Irish Celtic Tiger, we've built buildings that are substandard. They're falling apart now. We have the Opal building in Sydney, given a lot of concern, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. So when we're talking about carbon and climate, we need to be talking to government. We need to be getting these people to change. We need these people to lead. Business, much more flexible, greater resources, we can change quicker, and we are doing that. And the generations that are coming through now are more savvy. Changing the way we do things, even our supply chain, I'm sure you've heard of the Networks program. You talk about collaboration. No company can do it on its own. Here's a situation where you have fishing stocks depleted because of overfishing, a very dense community living on the Danajon Bank in the Philippines, fishing nets cluttering the waterways, damaging the remaining marine life. Zoological Society of London are there offering advice and trying to get them to preserve their environment and conserve their environment. And we discovered that those nets are made of nylon. We put in the third party, our supplier Aquafil, and we've got now a really beautiful international collaboration. Small community business where they can actually collect, clean the nets, ship them to Aquafil, get paid for that, and use that money plus learnings from the Zoological Society of London, how to find alternative means of income. Seaweed farming, replanting the mangroves so that the fish can spawn and replenish the fish stocks. In other words, how to live sustainably. A restorative project, and also it just changes the whole idea of the supply chain. Cutting that addiction to the petrochemicals again, looking at taking materials that already exist and using sunshine to make new products. So, future, backings of the future. So I'm just going back to that video I showed earlier, and I showed that one specifically for a reason, because Ray talks about products that already exist. Waste materials. I was at a facility, processed engineered fuels they call it. What they do is they take construction waste, timber, plastics, a lot of stuff that could probably still be recyclable, and they mash it up into fine chunks. They fill it into lorries and it goes off to cement factories. They even export that to Malaysia. You've got to wonder what the impact that is. It's much better if you can get those materials, either reduce, eliminate, or recycle. Some of the timbers you can't recycle because they're contaminated with other materials, so you have to look at the supply chain again. You've got to redesign the way we make things so that in future we can recycle them. It's about product stewardship. Issue is now is that a lot of the stuff would contain toxins and toxic materials that incineration is probably the only thing for them. And then you can contain that in the ash. And even though the discharges from these incinerators or waste to energy facilities is clean, i.e. zero particulates, is still carbon going into the atmosphere. So we have to look at that as a last resort or a stepping stone to a better future. And I think that's the way we have to move. Design our products to be fit for life. So back into the future is effectively we've looked at how we back our carpet, and we're saying, right, what's in your wheelie bin at home, your commingled, that's the raw material for us in the future. Formworks, agricultural piping, window frames, door frames, anything that's thermoplastic, we can take back, we can shred, we can melt, we can extrude, pelletize, we can convert into sheet, and we can put it on carpet. Not only that then, when we have our carpet there with our evergreen lease that I mentioned earlier, or our re-entry program, we can take that back end of life. So we can sequester that carbon and just keep it in the loop. And that's our goal and aim. So letting nature cool was just a very, very simple one. We really have to care for our habitat. We have to stop ripping out forests, and we have to stop felling trees. We have to look after our oceans, the lungs of the earth. And there are many ways of doing it. I'll tell you about this project that I'm working on, even though it's very early stages. I'm talking to the fisheries here in New Zealand and mussel shells. And we've taken mussel shells and ground them up to a fine powder. And we can use that to replace the limestone filler in our carpet, because the limestone filler is about 50% of this carpet, chalk. So if we replace that with the ground up mussel shells, we have now got sequestered carbon in there. We can reduce the footprint of our backing by 30%. The question is, can I get it from New Zealand to Australia cheaply enough, or at least similar cost to what we're paying for limestone locally? So there you go. That's the things that we have to do to let nature breathe. We have to reduce what we're putting out and take back up what we can to help nature cope with the rest.